time for another installment of Life After Housewives. Who do we have on the docket today? Phaedra Parks.
So if you watch my channel, you know I started my series, Life After Housewives, quite a while ago. I'm often imitated, but never duplicated. And that's because I choose stories from my heart. I actually choose stories that I'm really interested in. And have you ever heard of the reality TV curse? I've always wondered, were Phaedra and Apollo a victim of that curse, or was this relationship doomed from the beginning? Let's look into their story from the beginning.
Phaedra Parks was born on October 26, 1973, to Regina Bell and Henry Parks in Athens, Georgia. She grew up in a middle-class Christian conservative household where both of her parents were pastors and educators. Education was very important in their household. So Phaedra went to college right after high school. She went to a small all-women's college called Westland College in Macon, Georgia, where she got a Bachelor's of Art degree in communications. Then she went to the University of Georgia, where she got her law degree. Later in life, she would go on to get a bachelor's degree in mortuary sciences degree from Jefferson State College. Apollo Nida, on the other hand, well, he grew up the polar opposite of Phaedra. Life for him was much more chaotic, to say the least. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia on November 19, 1979, to parents of mixed heritage. His father, who was out of his life at a very early age, was African American, and his mother, she was of German descent. This caused Apollo to have to deal with race issues at a very early age. Apollo has been quoted as saying the Caucasian half of his family, well, they were biased towards him because he was black. So he knew the penetrating effects of having someone refer to him as the N-word. Apollo will go on to say, growing up, you hear the N-word and have low self-esteem. But for me, I was just like repellent. Race wasn't the only issue he had to deal with growing up. His single mother was poor with a huge drug problem. In this unstable environment, he would witness his mother being beat up by a boyfriend, and to make matters worse, he even saw his mother OD in front of him at the age of 7. He would accuse his mother of never providing him with a stable home environment. He was simply passed from one person to the next. He didn't even start grade school until he was in 3rd grade. There was also times when he was actually homeless, so by the time he got to high school, he just dropped out. Now, both Apollo and Phaedra have different stories as how they actually met in 1995. According to Phaedra, they were high school sweethearts. However, due to the age difference, this would virtually be impossible. According to Apollo, he flagged her down on Interstate 285, followed her home, and walked her to her doorstep and said, "Hey, I want you to be my girlfriend," and that's how they got together.
Now, if you think how they met was confusing and a conflict of interest, just hold on. This is when the story gets even more confusing.
Around 1999, according to their ex-friend and author of the book Lives of a Real Housewife, Angela Staton claims they all were involved in some serious criminal behavior. According to Angela, Phaedra and Apollo were remaking fraudulent insurance checks, and Angela would go to the bank with her identification, deposit the check, and then go back to the bank and withdraw the money the following day. They ran this scam for 2 years until Angela and Apollo got caught and sent to jail for it. Angela got out of jail for it first. Apollo got out of prison for it second. By then, they graduated to a bigger scheme. This time, they added Apollo's brother, Everett, to the mix. They would go to car lots, write down the VIN numbers, then Phaedra and Everett would make a fake identification and registration card for that vehicle. The next day, they would take the fake ID and registration to another car dealership and tell them this was their vehicle and they lost the key, so they would get another key made. Then they would go back to the original dealership at night and drive off with the stolen car. Eventually, the feds arrested Angela and Apollo and charged them with racketeering. Apollo spent 5 years in prison. According to Angela, Phaedra covered her tracks and walked away scot-free.
Now, no matter who you believe, Angela or Phaedra, in the eyes of the law, Phaedra was innocent and free to live the life that she wanted to live. And to say the least, her life got even more crazy.
When Apollo was in prison, Phaedra's law firm began to thrive. She began to get celebrity clients, such as Bobby Brown. Phaedra was Bobby's attorney during his famous trial for assaulting his superstar wife, Whitney Houston. Bobby Brown would later go on to say, "Every time I stepped into a courtroom when Phaedra Parks was my lawyer, there would always be a host of television cameras. It was as if she had her own traveling media. I even complained about it, telling her I didn't like having the press there every time I approached the courthouse." She was even the attorney for the famous retrial case of Lena Sims Driscoll, the 81-year-old convicted of murder. She would even make television appearances, giving her insight on the Michael Jackson 2005 trial.
Say what you want about Phaedra Parks. The girl was definitely making a name for herself. And by the time Apollo got out of prison, let's just say he came home to a whole new world.
Apollo got out of prison in 2009, and according to some, Phaedra and him were dating the entire time he was incarcerated. But according to Phaedra, they weren't dating at all. In fact, she had no idea of the things he was doing before he got arrested. Nevertheless, the couple got married in 2009. Shortly afterwards, Phaedra got pregnant with their first child. That same year, Phaedra got the news that the audition tape she submitted to the reality show, The Real Housewives of Atlanta, was a huge success, and she officially got hired as a full-time housewife. So she let the cameras into her 4,000 square foot suburban home and began filming season 3, which officially premiered October 4th, 2010. Coming on an already established major hit show would be overwhelming to many, especially with strong personalities like Nene Leakes, but not for Phaedra. She immediately walked into her own controversial storyline. When the women realized a pregnant Phaedra said she was 5 to 6 months pregnant, but the baby was due any day now, someone asked, "Isn't it dangerous for the baby to come at 6 or 7 months?" Phaedra's response, "Not if everything's fully formed and the lungs are functioning." The women tried the entire season to get her to admit her timeline didn't make any sense, but Phaedra wouldn't budge. Many suspected she was lying because she didn't want her pastor mother to know the baby was conceived out of wedlock. Sheree Whitfield got so frustrated, she ended up saying, "Bitch, you don't know when you got knocked up?" Phaedra fit in perfectly with the rest of the cast. The following year, the couple had their second child. Each season issued new drama for Phaedra, especially when Kenya Moore joined the cast. Some would say both Kenya and Apollo were openly flirtatious with each other. Kenya openly said in an interview that she thought Apollo was fine, but never crossed the line with him. Apollo had a different story. He accused Kenya of sending him inappropriate text messages. He even proposed that Kenya wanted to have sex with him. This forced Kenya to release the actual messages to prove that she didn't do anything wrong. But this didn't change Phaedra's opinion. She continued to falsely call Kenya a whore. In April 2013, Phaedra and Apollo moved into a beautiful new semi-French style mansion, which they immediately spent thousands of dollars on upgrades. During this same time, it was widely reported that Apollo would frequently go to strip clubs, spending lots of money in one night, and there were slight whispers of him having several mistresses. However, no evidence ever confirmed this to be true. Then, on January 23, 2014, Apollo was charged with bank fraud and identity theft. Apollo was accused of stealing people's identity and then having accomplices pretend to be them to open bank accounts. Then they would deposit fraudulent auto loan checks, stolen U.S. Treasury checks, stolen retirement checks issued to Delta Airline employees, and checks in the names of real people that were owed unclaimed property from various state and federal government agencies. They would deposit these checks into the phony bank accounts to the tune of $2 million. He also opened a fake auto dealership, such as Ferrari Auto House, and applied for phony auto loans in the names of the stolen identities. Federal agents also had tape-recorded conversations with Nida in which he explained his crimes in great detail. In other words, he had been followed by the feds. After Apollo's arrest, immediately many people questioned Phaedra's innocence. This was the same exact crime he'd committed in the past. How could she not question where all the money was coming from? Yet, just like in the past, Phaedra wasn't charged with any crimes, and Apollo was. This put a huge strain on their marriage. Simply put, Phaedra was furious.
Phaedra was so upset she didn't appear to a single hearing for Apollo. And to make matters worse, well, life didn't get any better from there.
As Apollo awaited his sentencing, things continued to spiral for him and Phaedra. Apollo accused Phaedra of having an affair with a man she called Mr. Chocolate. Mr. Chocolate turned out to be fellow housewife Giselle Bryant's ex-husband and current boyfriend, Pastor Jamal Bryant. Giselle even admitted on the Wendy Williams show that Phaedra had been telling people that these two were having an affair. And her relationship with good friend Candy Burris unraveled as Phaedra felt that Candy and Todd were more supportive of Apollo than they were of her. On September 10th, Apollo turned himself in to serve his 8-year sentence. Left alone to parent her 2 children, her plate was full. She had to deal with the lawsuit she filed against Angela Stanton for releasing the book Lives of a Real Housewife. Ultimately, the case was dismissed with prejudice, allowing the book to be released. And Apollo, what was his life like in prison as Phaedra was dealing with the outside world? Well, he quickly got engaged after their divorce to a woman he was romantically tied to before going to prison. Her name was Shireen Al-Mufti.
Now, whether Apollo knew this woman romantically before prison or not really didn't matter to Phaedra because she was about to face one of the biggest challenges in her reality TV career.
In 2017, on the Season 8 reunion, Phaedra was forced to admit that she lied on ex-pal Candy Burris and her husband Todd. Phaedra concocted the story that these two planned to drug and take advantage of castmate Portia Williams. Castmates were outraged by the lie, including fellow housewives from other franchises like Tamra Judge. Tamra stated, "When you make up a lie about a castmate or a husband and try to destroy their character and reputation, you should be fired." And Bethany Frankel would say, "It was disgusting. I don't think Phaedra can bounce back from that." And she was right. After 6 seasons of being a housewife, Phaedra was fired.
Now, Phaedra was definitely down and out, and nobody, absolutely nobody, expected a comeback, except perhaps maybe Phaedra did. Let's listen to the rest of her story.
It wasn't long before Phaedra was back in the spotlight. In fact, some would say she never left the spotlight. She became a Wilhelmina model, and one day her name started trending when people thought she was dating Shamar Moore. Then reports began to circulate that she was in talks with BET to do a talk show with Natalie Nunn Lunell and Trina Braxton. She even appeared on several episodes of Braxton Family Values with Tracy Braxton and Flavor Flav. She even made the blogs when she briefly dated DJ Tone Capone. Then, to everyone's surprise, polls start appearing on the internet, naming her the best shade thrower of all the housewives. Then articles began to surface of her best shade moments. The unthinkable appeared to be happening. Her fan base seemed to be growing. Nene Leakes even began to publicly say that she wanted Phaedra back on the show. She even took her along to Andy Cohen's baby shower, where she seemed, shall I say, welcomed. Reports even began to surface that she was in negotiations with Bravo for her and Apollo, who was nearing the end of his prison sentence, to reappear on the show. Things seemed to be going good for Phaedra, but not for her and Apollo's relationship as a whole. Apollo began making public statements that Phaedra was not allowing him to see his children, indicating that things between him and Phaedra were even more intense than anyone knew. It felt like the stage was set for the return of Phaedra and Apollo. Apollo was even given a release date and was quickly released into a halfway house. Then quickly came the shocking news that Apollo had broken probation rules and was quickly sent back to prison. All rumors of their return to the show suddenly stopped.
Now, there are many reports as to why Phaedra didn't return to the Housewives. Some say Apollo returning to prison was the reason. Others say she was asking for too much money. It's neither here or there. All that's important is that it didn't stop her comeback.
More good news continued to come Phaedra's way. There were even reports that she was going to be on the upcoming season of Marriage Boot Camp with her new boyfriend, Medina Islam, and her law firm continues to thrive. And as far as Apollo's concerned, well, he's out of prison and seems to be focusing on making money the honest way. He's trying to become a barber. And I have a strange feeling that these two will never completely fall out of the spotlight. And who knows, we just might see them somewhere down the road on television again together. I mean, never say never. But what I want to know in the meantime, do you think the reality TV curse doomed this marriage, or do you think this marriage was doomed from the beginning? And don't forget to leave in the comment section who you'd like to see next on my series, Life After Housewives. Until next time, see you then. Bye.